morning is from Ezra 1, verses 1 through 5 from the Inclusive Bible. Ezra, a scribe and priest, recounts the return of Babylonian captives to Jerusalem. In the first year of the reign of Cyrus, the ruler of Persia, fulfilling the prophecy of Jeremiah, God inspired Cyrus to issue a proclamation through the empire, both in written word and by word of mouth. Thus says Cyrus, ruler of Persia, it read, "The Most High God of heaven, who has given to me all the nations of the earth, has ordered me to build a temple in Jerusalem in Judah. Whoever among you is from God's people, may God be with you. You may go up to Jerusalem in Judah to build the temple of your God, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem. And every Jewish person, wherever they live, is to be assisted by the people of that place with silver, gold, goods and cattle, together with freewill offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Then the heads of the families of Judah and Benjamin, together with the priests and the Levites, and in fact, everyone whom God inspired to do so, prepared to go and rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem."
There's a lot of material today. So I ask you just to take a deep breath and grab onto the things that speak to you. Don't worry about taking it all home with you. But hopefully there are some pearls of wisdom this morning that will help you think about a lot of things in a different way. This morning we hear the passage from Ezra. We don't often read Ezra in Protestant churches. Book from the Hebrew Bible. Ezra was a priest and a scribe who lived in Babylon and wrote just after the return of the exiles, the people in captivity in Babylon, when they went back to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. So Ezra, which is not a very long book, I recommend it to your reading, is the history of that return and the rebuilding of the temple, which happened in a matter of 3 years, amazingly enough, that enormous temple in Jerusalem. But the point of Ezra's words and story are about coming through the darkness. This has been our whole Advent journey here, is how do we move through darkness without letting it consume us, and actually with building a relationship with it. So Ezra is living proof that in a long period of darkness, 50 years worth, the Jews who lived in Babylon not only stayed faithful to God, but a lot of the Hebrew Bible was written down during that captivity. So that pain, that difficult time, yielded many bits of light for all of us. So keep that in mind. Take a deep breath. And here we go. We're plunging into the deep. En route to the floor of the ocean, the deep sea diver first passes through the belt of fishes. This is a wide band of light reflected from the surface of the sea. From this area, he moves into a depth of water that cannot be penetrated by light above the surface. It is dark, foreboding, and eerie. The diver's immediate reaction is apt to be one of fear and sometimes a sudden spasm of panic that soon passes. As he drops deeper and deeper into the abyss, slowly his eyes begin to pick up the luminous quality of the darkness. What was fear is relaxed, and he moves into the lower region with confidence and peculiar vision. So, what is dark is not necessarily dark. One of my favorite readings from my seminary years was from Catherine Keller, this amazing book, and I bought, I think, 3 copies, and they keep disappearing. I don't know if God's telling me something or what, but I keep going back to this book. Catherine Keller is a theologian who teaches at Frueh University in New Jersey. And she's an amazing theologian who has this vision of a living theology. It's not something that was in the past. We learn from the past, but it enlivens our own sense of God and God with us. One of her students, Marian Grau, was one of my theology professors, so I feel like I'm the grandchild of Catherine Keller. Maybe that's why I relate to it so well. In her book, Face of the Deep, she talks about various concepts in the Bible, particularly in the Hebrew Bible, and how we have maybe misinterpreted them. And she talks about the story of creation. And in that story, we know that God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God moved over the face of the deep, the tehom. The Hebrew word for the deep is tehom. And Keller suspects that we have a fear of that tehom that infuses our theology. Her idea is that the deep is not nothing. In Latin, a lot of people say that creation came from ex nihilo, from nothing. And her viewpoint is that darkness was alive and luminous. And it got rearranged as God moved over the face of that and creation happened. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And she quotes Nicholas of Cusa, who says, "This is not light whose opposite is darkness, but light in which darkness is infinite light." I'm going to read it again. "This is not light whose opposite is darkness, but light in which darkness is infinite light." Wow. Is that amazing? It's hard to grasp. But I was reading the various discussions about white and black. White is the presence of all color, some people say, and the black is the absence of color. Some folks say black is the presence of all color. There doesn't seem to be, it depends what scientific area you come from. The physicists say that white is the presence of all colors, but other scientists say that black has, the pigment people, the painters, the artists. So we have this incredible pull about light and dark. And Keller is helping us look at the dark in a different way, so that it isn't nothing, it isn't absence of everything, that it's alive, that it has presence. There are a couple of other things that she talks about in this book, in this chapter on the creation. Luminous dark is her word. Luminous dark. The dark is not empty, just like the diver discovers. And I remember when I was at camp last year, we went on a, I can't remember what they call it, a midnight, what?
Night hike.
Night hike. We call it a midnight hike when I was in camp. And we got in a line holding hands, and we went out in the dark, pitch black, with no flashlights, with someone leading us. And there was a kind of a way, if you saw or felt something in the way, you squeezed the hand of the person behind you, so that they knew something was coming up. But the further we got into the forest, and this is old growth forest at Camp Adams, so it was very dark, there was no moonlight. There was stuff glowing on the ground. I don't know if it was luminous plants or bugs or what, but it was not dark. It was dark, yes, you couldn't see much. But it was a living dark, it wasn't an absence of everything. So, luminous dark. And also, she focuses on light supremacism. Remember, we talked, Barbara Brown Taylor in the first week of Advent talks about Christians have a solar spirituality that focuses on light, rather than a lunar spirituality which focuses on different levels of darkness. Well, she claims, and she makes a pretty good point, that light supremacism leads to racism. Now, you can read Catherine Keller if you want. It is the most dense reading I've ever done. You have to read each sentence 3 or 4 times. Big words, tightly packed. But she's very clear about the fact that this sense of light always being good has seeped into our understanding of everything, so that white skin is good, dark skin is bad. It's a very interesting concept. I would love to dig into that more with her. I'd like to sit down and say, tell me more about this. But it's interesting that Howard Thurman, the wonderful mid-20th century theologian, has written a book called Luminous Darkness, a personal interpretation of the anatomy of segregation and the ground for hope. And he explores some of these same ideas that Keller talks about, that we're so focused on white that we lose track of the value of dark. And like I say, I can't explain all of it to you, but it really makes me curious and want to find out more about how we have been impacted as Christians by lifting up light as all good and dark as bad. Thurman reminds me of Ezra in this book. One of the things he says, and he quotes himself from a speech called The Negro Spiritual Speaks of Life and Death. And he says this: "The slaves made a worthless life, the life of chattel property, a mere thing, a body. They made it worth living." Out of that horrible situation came this body of words and music called spirituals, which sing about what that darkness means to them, what that deep pain and hurt means to them. This is not to say that that kind of thing is good. It's like when you get lemons, make lemonade. We have to deal with what life brings us, and it's how we deal with it that enlivens our life, that helps us move forward. Howard Thurman, excellent read. Just Google Howard Thurman and you will not be disappointed. In Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, she cites a National Geographic article from 2008 called "In the End of Night, Why We Need Darkness." And this focuses on the phenomenon of light pollution. We don't know what's in the dark, so we have to light everything up. How many of you have night lights in your house? Now, how many as kids had to have a light on in your bedroom? Yeah. We put light every possible place. Now, for some of us who are clumsy and don't see down very well, that's an important thing. I'm not knocking that. But it seems like this is a picture of, this is Las Vegas, some big city. And it's Chicago. It's Chicago. And look how bright it is. That's at nighttime. This is a map of the U.S. taken by satellite at night. And it's funny, I saw a Facebook post from a friend who lives in Montana yesterday, and he had this map up in a little outline of Montana, and he says, "I live in the dark spot." And I wrote back to him and said, "I'm using this map in my sermon tomorrow, and I think you live in the sweet spot, where there isn't light." So you can see how light infuses everything, even from miles and miles in space. This picture is taken on the salt flats on the west side of the lake, 100 miles from Salt Lake City. And all the light you see there is from Salt Lake City, 100 miles away. Granted, there are some clouds, and it's reflecting off the clouds, but the light is everywhere. And because of that, you don't get to see this. Now, this also is in Utah, Arches National Monument. And look at the sky. Now, when we look from Portland, we don't see much. If you go up on Larch Mountain, you get a lot more. Or up on Mount Hood at night, you can see a lot more. The dark isn't dark. And how much do we miss by polluting the dark with light? The article cites many different impacts of light pollution. Some of them on natural things. There is a story of turtles that come ashore in Florida to lay eggs, and the way they find their way back to the water is following the light. Well, there's a row of high-rise condominiums opposite the water, and so when the babies are born, they go that way, not to the water. So this putting artificial light everywhere has impacts not just on nature, but on us as well. What will we miss if we eliminate darkness? I'm not looking for specific answers, but I invite you over this week as we come to the longest night of the year, a week from Monday, to think about what we would miss if we got rid of the darkness, if there was no darkness, everything was light. And how is our understanding of God impacted by embracing the darkness? Since we began this study, I've been very sensitive to light good, dark bad comparisons. And I see so often from many of my clergy colleagues, the light is coming, the light is coming. And I get that. But we're in the dark. So let's find out what the dark can teach us and what the dark can bring us. Because it's luminous.